Thank you for being here. The APNU has been struggling to find its footing confronted with the core question, which is whether they have a plan for the development of Guyana. We'd recall that in the period approaching the 2015 elections, they indicated they had a plan for everything under the sun. They had lots of ideas in their manifesto. We pointed out that the ideas were disjointed. They could not be supported by rigorous economic analyses, and they would never be implemented. But APNU promised at that time to reduce taxes because people were overburdened with taxes under the PPP civic government. They claimed that. The fact is that they increased taxes. It was the most rapid period of escalation in tax collections in the country in those 5 years. And this did not come from economic growth, expansion of the economy, because the fact is that the economy, many sectors in the economy shrunk. It came largely from additional taxation. And we know what they are. I'm not going to go through those again, but we've pointed out that a minimum of 200 odd fees and taxes were increased. And as I pointed out, when we actually did the numbers, we used to use that 200 figure. We actually came up with over 340 tax measures, additional tax measures that were instituted by the last government in the 5 years period that had an impact on people's lives, because what it did, it removed economic incentives to the private sector. So they had promised to create more jobs, claiming there were not enough jobs under the PPP in 2015. The fact of the matter is that we lost over 35, maybe 40,000 jobs in the pre-COVID period. They said the cost of living was high at that time, the same thing that they're saying now. They would reduce the cost of living. The fact is that oil prices plunged from $120 a barrel to down to $30 a barrel. They didn't have any COVID at that time, yet cost of living increased in the 5 years period without the external factors like we have now impacting on price movements. And so they had no plan at that time. They had absolutely no plan, not a single document that you could point to. So I guess that caused them recently to, in the Kaichor News Peeping Tom, I think this is a coordinated attempt, because we spoke about the evolution of our plans historically for the period in which we have held the reins of government. And we look at the economic progression of the country. And that progression was not by chance. It was all in accordance with a clear vision and a plan to support it. And we pointed out how it moved from the National Development Strategy to the Poverty Reduction Strategy, then to the Competitiveness Strategy, and ultimately to the Low Carbon Development Strategy, reflecting the changing challenges over the period. So they had an editorial, no doubt written by the PNC, and the reason why I suspect not an editorial, a peeping Tom in the Kaichor News, no doubt written by the PNC, because I saw Annette Ferguson saying the same thing, writing the same thing. The PPP Civic has no national development strategy or plan to guide the development of our nation. And then the peeping Tom, PPP Civic has never endorsed a national development strategy. So I need to they're saying, this is what it says. The PPP Civic has never produced a concrete and comprehensive national development plan. While Vice President Bharrat Jagdeo might assert otherwise, the historical record does not support his claim that the PPP Civic has a development strategy. So they're actually saying the historical record don't support my claim. Now, and portraying this as a fact, if you go online now and Google Guyana National Development Strategy, you will see that there are 7 volumes, nearly 3,000 pages for development strategy that we produced. So nearly 3,000 pages in 7 volumes. So that's the historical fact, which you can check now online if you just Google Guyana National Development Strategy. A blatant lie in the peeping Tom by the PNC. So, and they claim that is a historical record, does not support my claim. This is how things get distorted, rewritten, revised. History gets revised. So the second thing is that they said that a plan that when we assumed office, the Carter Center encouraged us to create a national development strategy. However, this valuable plan was abandoned when Jagdeo was Minister of Finance. So this is a picture that I got recently. I didn't know that it existed, and someone sent it to me about a month or 2 months ago. This was a picture of me handing over to Chedi Jagan the National Development Strategy because I was in charge of its production. And the 7 volumes were handed over. This was Chedi Jagan receiving this. I had a lot of hair at that time. And so this is the fact. So we didn't abandon what Chedi Jagan wanted. In fact, I was in charge of the production of the strategy, and that was when it was completed, we handed it over to him. I handed it over to him at a public ceremony that he had. It says that the PNC, that it was never, although tabled in the National Assembly. So at the beginning, we never had a plan. Now they move to while the document was tabled in the National Assembly. So from the fact that, they never had a document, and Jagdeo repudiated this, to now it was tabled, it was never brought forward for debate or adoption. The fact is that the APNU opposed it. They did not want it. So they then said the opposition claimed that it was unduly influenced by external organizations like the Carter Center, and that it was eventually discarded. So my point is that they don't realize that APNU was opposed to any attempt to create a national strategy. In that document, it spoke about bridging this was done in the 90s, actually before 1995. And it was the bridging of the Berbice Bridge, a river, bridging of putting up a proper bridge across the Demerara River. A lot of the highways we're doing now were all reflected in that plan. It's a comprehensive plan, our ICT strategy then. The fact is that we did not have the resources over the period to implement all the measures in that national development strategy, because we had to deal, if you look at one of the volumes, we had to deal with macroeconomic stability, and there would have been no viable economic strategy without, first of all, ensuring macroeconomic stability. And what was the biggest bugbear to achieving that? It was the debt overhang. That when you were using nearly 100% of your debt, your revenue to service debt, you had to address that first as a priority. before you tackle a lot of the other issues. So I can go on here. I went with the Carter Center to Mozambique as Minister of Finance, and Mali and some other African countries to speak to I met with the presidents of those countries as Minister of Finance too, with a team, technical team from the Carter Center that was offering help to those countries to speak about their efforts and to support their efforts at creating a similar plan that we worked on for Guyana. I also got some pictures recently where President Hoyt and Chedi Jagan, we were at a meeting in Atlanta to look at how we can work together on these issues. So clearly there is a major attempt to rewrite history through these documents that surface, the Peeping Tom, and they say historic records don't support it, as that lends credibility to nonsense and lies. So, lie. So then they said the poverty reduction strategy was to get international funding. Of course, after a period, the target had to be dedicated to getting the vast numbers of people living in poverty and extreme poverty that we found in 1992 out of poverty or from extreme poverty to the ranks of the poor, because they were extremely poor, and there's a difference in the classification of the two. There is a Ramprakash study that was done in the 90s pointing out that 87% of the people of Guyana lived under APNU. It was commissioned through CIMAP at that time, lived under the poverty line. 87% of Guyana lived below the poverty line. So when they talk about 15% living below poverty line now, or look at the large number of poor now, we know differently. We know differently how far we have come as a country, from 87% of our people living below the poverty line. So we had, through the poverty reduction strategy, to have a dedicated focus on poor, how we were going to help to ensure that key things like water, access to electricity, housing for poor people were treated as a priority, job creation in poor areas, etc. And then, of course, we looked at the third element was how we will get our industries globally competitive to bolster our, not just the economy, but our export industries, and therefore we crafted the national competitiveness strategy, which until today has major relevance. And then the fourth area was when we decided how were we going to put, in the era of climate change and serious threats, existential threats to human life on Earth, we decided that we wanted to create a model that will not harm the prosperity of our people, yet place us on a sustainable, non-polluting development trajectory. And that is how the LCDS came into being, and we fleshed it out. So it is a total lie. This editorial had to be written, this not editorial, this Peeping Tom by PNC. But you know why I know it's the PNC? Because this is what it says. In stark contrast to the PPP Civic's elusive pursuit of national development strategy, the APNU AFC coalition took a more proactive approach. Proactive. During their time in government, they unveiled the Green State Development Strategy. Aren't these people totally shameless? Anybody know, have they read what this Green State strategy is? This was something that they paid a few consultants. They used over $2 million from money that we left from the Norwegian deal to pay the consultants to develop this strategy. And it had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with development. It's just called a Green State Development Strategy. It was a burden on the Treasury that we announced we'll scrap, and we scrapped it. It had nothing to talk about infrastructural development, the growth in social services, export growth, long-term production of national output that would be competitive in the global environment, the current global environment. Nothing of the sort. It's not a development strategy. And this is the delusion in the PNC. They have no plan. So again, when confronted in Washington, or yes, it was Washington, when they were there recently, with their plans for the future and in any sector, oh, we'll get back to you on that. When they were asked about evidence of discrimination, they mentioned a couple of people, Doreen Bess and others, and oh, we'll get back to you on that. We don't have the evidence here, we'll get back to you. The wishy-washy nature of their positions. But even when you listen to Norton, oh, I will give people more money. I will address inflation, cost of living. But I'm concerned about the overheating of the economy. Well, he doesn't use those terms, but I deduce that as one of his concerns. That is deductive reasoning, and he's concerned. They're two diametrically opposed initiatives. That he wants to spend more and yet achieve lower rates of inflation, and spend not on the sectors that don't push the growth in consumption demand, which is an import demand, but so if you spend on those sectors, you tend to have, because there's a greater coefficient for imports, you tend to push inflation faster. Those are the areas he wants to spend in, outside of the sectors where we are spending more on, that builds productive capacity for long-term growth, future growth, which in turn kind of impact on cost of living and people's disposable income over a more medium-term approach. So this is pure nonsense, and they're struggling with it every week to talk about a plan. They have no plan, absolutely no plan. Their manifesto that they spoke of. So now they have to run down efforts that we have had to try to say we had no plan, but we have a plan. Last week I said to you, you name the sector. If it's for energy, both from a climate perspective in reducing carbon emissions and supplying cheaper energy to our people, we have it all mapped out and the projects are already ongoing. The solar would start being implemented, 33 megawatts of solar. We're working on the mini hydros and now mini solar systems. We have the gas to energy project going. We're now adding to that the project for the Amilas Fall project, a comprehensive network. We're looking at transmission. We're looking at new control centers that would have us be able to manage the sector in a modern way and cost. If you go through any sector, I'm not going to repeat, we have the sectoral plans. I can tell you about them. I don't need to go and consult elsewhere because they're laid out in our documents. They have none of that. You can't run a country with these wishy-washy positions. And that's what they're struggling with. So Norton goes on to say, ordinary people have nothing to show for PPP civic 3 years in office. So The thing is that over 50,000 more of these ordinary people are working now than were not working on the APNU. Over 50,000. I'll challenge you to look at the numbers. Starbuck News always used the question, how are you going to get to 50,000? I can go through it sectorally to tell you about the job creation in areas and why we're having labor shortages today. That is ordinary people working. Ordinary citizens today, the children, I don't want to go back, they have back their money. The army, the public servants now are getting $37 billion more per year in wages and salaries, more than 2020 they got in 2020. $37 billion more. The pensioners are getting $14.5 billion more, and he's saying they don't have anything to show. About 30,000 people now have a plot of land that they did not have on the APNU. Thousands of others have a house now through the core homes, etc. facility that they didn't have on the APNU. And he speaks about nothing to show for it. So this is, I don't want to talk about the roads and all of that because that impacts on communities too, but those are the investments we're talking about. So this here is a lot of nonsense. It's APNU struggling again. APNU struggling again through lying to the people of this country. You just listen to them, and the outside of them, when racism, they use racism as a tool to divide our people. Outside of that, they can be very animated around that because they're grown so accustomed to peddling their lie. But outside of that, they're very uncomfortable. They don't have no mapped out plan for anything else. So you can have Patterson tell you how he would have done something in the past. But when he was there, he couldn't get the bridge built. He had a twisted bridge to land somewhere else. He illegally took the money, illegally went to cabinet and got the approval, all of that sort of stuff for the award. And I think he's charged for that now. So I just wanted to talk a bit about this Troy issue. No, I said last week that the ministry should deal with the Troy issue totally because they have all the details and everything else, and you should submit any questions you have to the ministry on that matter. So I've seen subsequently an editorial called The Great Escape, and from the Starbuck News. And then my dear friend, the GHK Lal, PPP civic government fully to blame over unpaid Troy royalties. So I started digging a little bit into this because I wanted the ministry to deal with it. I have lots of other things to do. So what struck me about this editorial is that it mentioned Nigel Dharmlal, Vikram Bharat about resigning. Then it went on to blame Ramatar for signing the agreement. Then it spoke about Ashni Singh, this is in 2014, giving a lot of, studied with fiscal concessions, a lot of fiscal concessions to the company. Then it blamed Robert Prasad, who was the minister at that time. And I'm looking to see any name from the APNU side, because this agreement was signed in 2014 and Troy started producing from 2015 to 2021. So 5 of the 6 years nearly or so were under APNU. So first of all, Ramatar signed this. Ramatar was signing many agreements in the oil and the natural resources sector because they were bringing jobs to the people of this country, and they were part of our plan for enhancing economic output. At that time, we didn't have oil and gas sector. So what's wrong with that? Because this was done for many similar deals. They said the agreement that Ashni Singh signed was studied with concessions. Now you have asked here, Kachor News, about all of the agreements in these sectors, and I got them released, and there you would check if the Troy agreement has any other concessions that the others didn't get. I didn't check it, but I can almost put my head on the block that Ashni Singh would have gone with the standard agreement. The standard agreement that everyone in the sector benefited from at that time. All the other goal. So this is clear. So they got concessions. So I don't know, Robert Prasad came in too, that mentioned that we are proud of the agreement. Yeah, so I then said that I asked the question, what happened in those 5 years? Because APNU was benefiting from the production. They were benefiting from the royalty and everything else. So I just called Ms. Thompson, who is the general manager of the Gold Board, about an hour ago, less than an hour, 30 minutes ago. And I asked her, what's the story? Because GHK Lal says PPP civic government fully to blame over the unpaid Troy royalties. So when did they not pay the royalties? Which years did they not pay the royalties? So she said to me, in 2018, you had 5,639 ounces of gold in royalty that they should have paid, that they did not pay, equivalent to the value of 7.2 million US dollars, or a total Ghanaian dollar value of over $1.5 billion. So that's the bulk of the money already there in unpaid royalties in 2018. So I'm thinking, was GHK Lal there at that time? Or who was in government at that time? Now, the fact of the matter is that the money should be paid to the government. Forget where it has to be paid, whether it is to the Gold Board, the GGMC, or the Central Bank, or the Ministry of Finance. But APNU was in office, and they failed to collect a royalty of 5,639 ounces, equivalent to 7.2 million US, or 1.5 billion of the outstanding 2.6 billion in Troy that Troy has to us, 2018. So 2019, everything was paid. 2020 again, they didn't pay royalty for 879 ounces. So that's another 1.6 million US, or 349 million Guyana dollars. So that takes you nearly to about 1.9 billion of the 2-point-something billion dollars. And so most of this was in there. And then in 2021, it was just 1,581,000,000, or $1 million US dollar of royalty that was not paid. 1 million US. So all of the outstanding liabilities mainly were done on the APNU period. And yet, this editorial blames, so it got Nigel Dharmlal name in it, suddenly he came in, Vikram Bharat, Robert Prasad, Ramatar, Ashni Singh. It's disgusting, disgusting. Absolving the whole APNU for this. And blaming all of this on the PP when they had absolutely, it was a failure, mainly on the part of APNU for this. And so it is a trend I see now. Now, there are lots of things that I don't see an editorial on that Patterson paid to, or his ministry paid a consultant of theirs, the man who helped to broker the Lilienthal Accord, to submit, to deliver scales to Ghana. The scales never came, but he got $70 million. How come they don't blame that? We don't see an editorial about that. But Patterson gets invited to the Moray House Forum. He is now one of the new fellows there. This is, I can go on. How come they're not so concerned about the failures of government at that time? But this, in attempting to make this a failure of the PPP civic government, they expose their hands at how biased an editorial of that nature would be by blaming us when the blame should be laid squarely on APNU. This situation dragged on for a while. And the fact of the matter is that they benefited from in office from the production for an investment made or signed under the PPP. An investment signed under the PPP. They benefited because the production came in, they had more money, they had more jobs created, etc. A lot of people are working there. So this here, I'm hoping that people will look at these matters. I want to talk a bit about the oil and gas sector now. So today the cabinet reviewed the submission from our international consultants and the evaluation team, and they decided to award the blocks to the companies that I'm going to now read out to you. Later today, you're going to have, I've asked Minister Bharrat to put out a full press release, so you would have the document in greater detail. The S3 has been awarded, and so now let me just explain that. Now that the award has been made, we now have to meet with the interested or the parties to which the blocks have been awarded to have a negotiation on the contracting. That is to move towards the completion of the award. We have made it clear before that the model PSA, the fiscal terms are not going to change. We said we are not going to change the major planks in the PSA dealing with transparency and accountability. We're open in the negotiations with all of these companies to minor changes in the PSA. But we're not touching the fiscal terms. So S3 has been awarded to CISPRO Inc., which is the local company. S4 to a consortium of Total Energies, Qatar Energy, and Petronas. These are three really big companies that came together and made a submission for S4. S5 to Group International Group Investment Inc., which is a Nigerian group. S7 to Liberty Petroleum Corporation, Sibel Energy Limited, which is a combination of an American and Ghanaian firm. S8 to ExxonMobil, Hess and Sinopec. S10 to International Group Investment Inc., which is the Nigerian group. D1 to Delcorp, which is locally incorporated group comprising of two Saudi companies, Saudi Arabian companies, Watad Energy and Communications Limited, an Arabian drilling company. So that's D2, D1 rather, D1. And D2 is Cispro Inc. So these are the awards that have been made. The local group has secured 2 blocks in a very competitive environment. And we now need to move to conclude or finalize the arrangements. We may have a situation where we not be able to finalize with everyone because, as you heard, ExxonMobil said they're not prepared to sign if the PSA as it's currently structured, it's too stringent, and you have heard our public position on that. If their demands are extreme, then we will simply not proceed with the signing in that regard. We've been told that everyone has confirmed that they have the resources to pay the signing bonus, which is $10 million for each block in the shallow, and $20 million for each block in the deep, and there are 2 blocks in the deep. So for any of this to move forward, at a minimum, these companies have to meet that requirement. I want to say that this is a very risky sector, and I'm extremely pleased that the locals have been able to organize themselves to work with some foreign companies and put in the bids. They're actually doing something. We can have people sit on the sidelines, particularly I need to mention Glenn Lal, and speak about how lucrative this sector is and how much money you will make, it's a gold mine and all of that, but he's unwilling to risk his money. These people are willing to risk their money in exchange for potential rewards that we're not even sure, because as I said before, it's a risky business. We have seen one group spend $500 million and now not being able to recover that. $500 million and without them being able to recover it because their license, their prospecting license expired. So I was hoping that he would have, since he feels so strongly about the sector and ring fencing and under fencing and over fencing and all kind of that, that he would have the courage, to actually do something like this, put in a bid, that he would have had the courage. But people like him thrive on half-truths and ignorance, total ignorance that's reflective of his positions every single day. So we didn't get him doing it, but thankfully there were other local people, and I want to commend them today for taking this bold step of getting involved. There were other locals who put their money in, and they were vilified. You recall, in both the Kanji and the Kaichor blocks, there are local Guyanese who put their money in. And so far, they haven't been successful. They have been spending money all the time on the exploration. But they were vilified. Now, at that time, if you applied, most likely you would have gotten a block without having to pay for it, because it was on a first come, first served basis. So they could have spoken about giveaways and all of that without recognizing how risky the business is. People like Glenn Lyle could have spoken about that. But now here, people had to bid, and they have an upfront signing bonus, not for a production license, as Exxon paid $18 million signing bonus for production. But this is for an exploration license, had to pay. They have to pay now a signing bonus. And you would recall that the provisions of the agreement, the PSA, is that the fine, apart from paying the upfront fee as a signature bonus, you have to come up with a plan for the exploration activities in the block. And if you fail to implement the plan, the fine is 50% of the cost of the original plan. So if you say we plan to spend over 5 years, $300 million US, and you don't spend any money, you have to pay a fine of $150 million US. So these are the terms now for the arrangement that these bidders will confront. And so I was hoping that, really hoping, I didn't get a chance to say this before, but hoping that he would have had the courage, rather than snipe at people on the sideline, people who are courageous and putting their money in the sector, including Guyanese, that instead of running them down, and they had a gold mine, etc., he would have done something about it. Recently, I've seen a lot of public reports globally and here locally about the recent takeover of Hess International by Chevron. The fact that Guyana is mentioned almost in every one of those international news reports demonstrates how far we have come and the importance of the growing importance of our country in the market for global supply of crude oil. And the fact that Guyana is an attractive destination for investments is something that we should all be happy about. We should all be happy about. You have seen globally a move now by both Exxon and Chevron, two of the biggest, and in fact the biggest companies, the two biggest companies in the United States of America, moving to consolidate and also to grow their crude assets. And they're doing so, and they're investing more and substantial sums of money too in acquiring new assets, because they are calculating that the global demand for fossil fuel will stay with us for a long time in the future, contrary to what we believe or what's being pushed for at the UNFCCC. If they miscalculate, they would lose a lot of their shareholders' money and their own money. But the fact that they're doing that is, when we speak about it, they're doing it because they've made serious calculations about this and based on an understanding of global markets. Their view has been bolstered by the head of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, who said that although we're moving at a fast pace to introduce renewable energy, there's such a robust demand for energy now that fossil fuel production or demand will still remain high and is growing, basically, because the renewables cannot be introduced at the scale and pace to offset the growth in global demand for energy. So this is coming from the IEA itself. And I hope that he wouldn't understand that. But when we talk about this, all of the people who are talking here about, the end of oil, etc., they should look at this, and that we should not really be moving forward in these investments, or investments would be stranded and all of that, that they should look at the global market. So we're pleased that there are two major U.S. oil companies here. These are big companies. We believe they have deep pockets and they can fund the investment programs necessary to move us to peak production at the earliest point in time. Other smaller companies that are investing in other parts of the world and other countries have to go to raise capital, and the market is still not that friendly raising capital. So we believe that Chevron, we have examined Chevron carefully, and Chevron will be a good partner too in Guyana. We have checked the agreement. That issue was raised, the carbon sale agreement with Hess, and that remains intact. I saw a letter in the Starbuck News, I think it was, about this issue, and we've been assured, my staff has told me, we have reached out and we have had all the assurances that the deal is intact. Secondly, that letter pointed out about the collapse of prices in the voluntary market. And that should tell you, if you look at what's written in the letter and the difference between what we got, it should tell you how much at a premium we sold our credits for. And that should be something that we should be proud of as a country. I see a lot of questions about the new audit that were raised and it's reflected. So as before, I'm not going to speak about details of the audit nor their findings, except to say a couple of things. So the Stabroek News ended, I don't know if it's an editorial, but it's ended. The government has not stated its position on this report thus far. October 21st. It might not be an editorial, it might just be a story. And I'm thinking that clearly there is something wrong in our communication. That this report is our position. We don't have a different position than this report at this point in time. It was the government of Guyana who contracted this consortium to do a report that has some findings. There's looking out for governments, the government's position and the national position. They now have some findings that they will have to present to ExxonMobil. They have an opportunity to respond to those findings. The GRA, as our advisor, will be part of that process to review these findings too. And then they will advise the government of Guyana what the final position will be. There is no other Vikram Bharrat position or ministry's position or the office of the president or Jagdeo's position. This is the position of the government of Guyana. And I recall now we're falling in love with the consortium. But you recall when I said that we're putting together this consortium, a lot of people were opposed to it, saying they didn't have expertise, they wouldn't be able to do a good job, we shouldn't do this. We had even comments from the opposition that we may downgrade the quality of the audit. Well, I'm pleased that you love the consortium so much and their findings, and we're vindicated that this is a good audit team made up mainly of Guyanese people that we deliberately put together to do these audits with some international help. And every one of those findings would have to be presented to ExxonMobil. And if they don't have answers that are satisfactory to the audit team and the GRA, then they would not be allowed to form part of the cost bank or come out of the cost bank. So that's all I'm going to say, because somehow people misinterpret this. This audit team is our people. We hired them. We put together this team to go in and look at the Exxon's account to see if they were complying with the conditions of the agreement. and these are their findings, which are our findings, because we hired this group. So to the extent that they find adverse things, that was their purpose, that was their job. The government should be commended for not interfering with their audit or telling them, oh, don't accept that, or constraining their audit. So I'm hoping that that understanding will exist, that we hired a firm, they presented, they finished their audit, you've seen the audit now, those at this point in time, that's the government's position, then they would have to give Exxon, as like with all draft audits, you have to give the company that's under audit an opportunity to respond. If they give reasonable responses, the audit team will then advise on how we address that. The GRA will be part of that process, and then they will advise us. We're not, as we did in the past, we're not getting involved as politicians in the audit and in determining any of this. And I made it clear at the beginning, if as the auditors found that there are any expenses, whether it's from Kanji, Kaichor for some barbecue or whatever, that is not eligible, if our auditors find that, then, and there's no reasonable response to those questions, or that is consistent with the PSA, then the government's position is clear. It will not form part of the cost back. Of course. I saw something here on, this is Peeping Tom again. Let me go to Peeping Tom, because I think it's a lot of PNC people writing these Peeping Tom, or someone. So this is what it says here. According to yesterday's edition of the Guyana Times newspaper, he's reported, and when you say he, you know who, Jagdeo, my name gets mentioned here all the time in that newspaper, to have told the country's diplomats that the government is cautious about entering into long-term purchase agreements to address the country's economic electricity woes. So I told a factual statement. I told the heads of missions, or diplomats, I was explaining to the diplomats about the focus of their economic diplomacy and trying to discern between serious investments and people who are wasting their time, who go in, large numbers of people go to them and they waste their time. And then I spoke to them about targeted investments in some areas, especially in light of potential overheating of the economy. So I was explaining the energy mix of the country and gave details, because they hear a lot. They may read some nonsense in the Starbuck News about the gas to energy project. So I went through it in great detail, giving them the numbers as to why it's feasible and how it will address the electricity woes of the country. I explained to them, but before I tell you what I explained to them, it comes back to this. So he's saying that, implying basically that I am pushing a Myla Fall, which is a controversial project. The project is not controversial. It was clear. The Norway study showed on the APNU that it was the best project. APNU killed it for political reasons, not economic reasons. They lied about the project. They lied about the debt. Glenn lied about the debt. He lied about the hydrology risk, no water there, etc. Lied about that in his papers, incessant. The same way how he carries this blunt, like one-pager for on ring fencing. He used to carry the same one-pagers for the Marriott Hotel, for the Berbice Bridge, for the Amila Fall, all of them, when they turn out to be projects that are essential to the development. So what we see now in his newspapers, blunt, etc., in those one-pagers, used to be there for Marriott and everything, and a bunch of lights. So we can't focus on that too much. But he was the person who wrote this is saying, how is it that Jagdeo is saying now that they're going back on the same model, which is a power purchase agreement for Amila's Fall, right, the power there, and not want to do a long-term power purchase agreement for people supplying emergency power now. So he told the diplomats no long-term power purchase agreement for emergency power, and he's saying now they will do a long-term power purchase agreement for Amila Fall. So he must be lying, or is this inconsistent? So the difference is that when we went out to tender, we got a price of about 7 cents per kilowatt hour, all inclusive. That is for transmission of the power down to the control center here in Georgetown. So that includes the transmission mains. For the capital cost and the recurrent cost is water. So the full cost, power delivered to us at 7 cents per kilowatt hour. The gas to energy project will come in at between 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, power is sold at 22 cents per kilowatt hour, US cents. We plan to drop it to 11 cents per kilowatt hour or thereabouts. So we can still sell power from the gas to energy project, a blend of power, and the Amila Fall project, and the solar that we will own at 11 cents per kilowatt hour, and make a profit and still have a viable electricity company. And people in Guyana will save hundreds of millions of US dollars per year in cheaper power. And every person power bill will come down by 50%, electricity bill. The gas to energy project will come in 2025. Emergency power suppliers now are coming in and they want a 5 years deal or a 10 years deal. They're coming in with fossil fuel engines. That is burning bunker or diesel or something. And the average cost is maybe 6 cents on US cents on the capital alone. When you add the variable cost, which is the fuel, it works out to about 14, 15 cents per kilowatt hour. If you sign a long-term or 5 years agreement at 15 cents per kilowatt hour, when our power plant comes in, the 300 megawatts there, and we have to turn off all of the existing units around the country in the interconnected grid from Parika right up to Crabwood Creek, and then starting to go up to Linden, because we supply back power to Linden. And supply now from the stable, cheaper power. We turn off all the units and put them into reserve. and we have a long-term power purchase agreement with someone now for emergency power, we'd still have to pay them for power that we're not using. We'd have to pay them at an exorbitant price for power that we're not using. And that is why we cannot tie up for emergency power for the period between now and 2025. We can't tie up long-term agreements, long-term power purchase agreements. Short-term power purchase agreements are fine, but not long-term. So that is why I said to the diplomat, if somebody comes in to you and say, oh, I see blackouts in Guyana, I want to supply power to you. If it's a long-term arrangement, tell them no, we can't go with that because it would leave these assets stranded and a cost to the country. And not, so the question how I said that there, and then we're tying up with a mile, a long term, which is different. It's nuance, it's context. And this is what you can't deal with complex issues with Glenn Lal and his likes, the ilks of Glenn Lal. And this is, I don't know who wrote this sort of thing, but it is, I don't know, I don't want to be mean, maybe he just didn't understand. He just didn't understand. But that is a simple explanation, and anybody who has any sense would know that. You don't want to lock into agreement that you have to pay for things you're not using. APNU would do that easily. They would just go and sign it. We're not APNU. We're not going to do that. And that is why we opted. When we look at buying power, there is a proposal from a very important company. They're supplying power now to many parts of the world, in Africa, etc. They'll bring a ship and supply you with the power in a month. But when we look at, they want a minimum 5 years agreement. When we look at the capital cost alone for 20-something megawatts in 5 years, what we will repay, when you calculated it as cents per kilowatt hour, 6 cents per kilowatt hour only in capital cost, $90 million we will pay back over the 5 years on capital costs. To buy the same power plants now, we'll spend $30 million. And we would have them here, and when you'd have the power plants that's coming in December, and then when the 300 megawatts comes in, we can deploy these sets, keep them as reserves. So just in case anything goes wrong, you have to take down one of the units for maintenance, you then crank up your reserves. Right now, we don't have any reserves. Everything, we're at maximum. Everything is producing at full steam. So if one goes down, we have shortages. It would change the whole dynamic. So I want this every week we have to do this. Almost every week it's becoming like a pain, but we have to keep explaining to people who don't like understand basic stuff. I'm still waiting for Glenn Lal to show how solar will be base load. Because he and what's the man named Sanzillo, or your friend Sanzillo is saying, go with solar as base load. I am still waiting for that and the proposal. But can you imagine this? This is in Glenn Lal papers. Economics 101 teaches us that investors need stability and certainty to justify large capital expenditure. Imagine Economics 101. So tell Glenn Lal in his paper, it says Economics 101. He needs Economic 001. Right now, 101. It might be complex. Says that you have to have stability and certainty. And every single day, he argues publicly for us to violate these two basic principles: stability and certainty in our agreements, so that would make us unattractive. That is what this article says in his paper, and they should teach him the lesson, basically. I just want to reiterate what we said in our party press statement about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The People's Progressive Party has historically been on the side of a two-state solution. We have been pushing for this at various fora. We believe that only through that solution that you can have lasting peace in that area of the world. We believe the Palestinians have a right to live in dignity in an independent country called Palestine with defined borders. And we believe the Israeli people, they have a right to live in security too in their own country. Our national position has always been the two-state approach to solving this issue definitively. The fact that this has not been pursued by the international community for a large number of years is unacceptable. And we need to return to this immediately with great vigor, the search for a two-state solution where all the people living there can live in peace and dignity. We in the People's Progressive Party, we've always condemned any act of violence against innocent civilians, particularly children, women and children, from whatever the source. From whatever the source. From the Hamas, or in this case, Hamas, or the Israelis. It's unacceptable. And we believe that there must be a ceasefire now. We believe that the international law must govern the actions of all of the players from both sides, but it's totally unacceptable to cut off water and electricity and starve people as part of a collective punishment. And we condemn that strongly. Israel has an obligation to, whilst defending itself, to act in accordance with international law. And we support the statements issued by CARICOM and the UN Secretary General and many others who have called for the things that I mentioned before. An immediate ceasefire and a compliance with international law. And a return immediately to the search for the two-state solution. Let me see if there is anything else here that I may want to address. Oh, Jagdeo now admits more profit now by ring fencing. I didn't admit that. I explained it to Glenn Lal. Yeah. Okay, I'll end there. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Kiana Wilbur, Kaicher News. A few questions, starting first with what you noted about Troy Resources in your opening statement. So you did reveal that there was about $1 million US that accumulated during the PPP's time or its takeover from office. Do you think that the current
Can you
administration...
lend me a pen, please? Marcel, lend me your pen there, please. And yeah, so I can make a couple of notes here. Yeah, go on.
Yes. Do you think the criticism by some, and particularly JHK Lal, is fair to say that the government dropped the ball? Because while the APNU is to take some of the blame for being negligent and allowing a lot of that to accumulate, the PPP also dragged its foot in not taking a proactive stance on the matters as soon as it got into office, because it did accumulate to, as you said, 1 million US.
Yeah.
I noticed that you pay a lot of attention to many of the stories that Kaiser News would carry, and I wanted to know if your interest was piqued by some of these stories we've been carrying on Suriname. For example, we did a story which showed that Suriname does not allow oil companies to recover their interests on loans, period. That's not recoverable. But the situation is different in Guyana, and we have carried several stories advocating for government to cap interest rates. And I do know your position, but do you think there are any advantages to what Suriname is doing?
Yes. So we had our advisors look at the entire spectrum of competitiveness as a country. And competitiveness is defined not just by how much you take out, like their royalty in this case, or the profit share. It has various other measures that will impact on the finances of a company. So the mere fact that you ring fence at a lower level, not ring fence, you reduce the amount for cost recovery, right at the beginning to 65% has an impact. The 10% tax has an impact. So they look at all of the issues. We said, look at everything. Now, clearly, from that analysis, they pointed out that our regime, for the future, will give the country a total take of over 60%. Over 60% of the production operations of the oil and gas company, and that's within a competitive range. If you keep layering on everything, then you run the risk of not being competitive or trying to pick and choose one element of a regime from one country without looking and comparing it with the overall regime in that country compared to the overall regime here. So we have an overall fiscal regime in Guyana now. Compare that with the overall fiscal regime in Suriname. And then you will see that we're very competitive in terms of national take in our total regime. If you pick one element and say, look, this country is doing this, but they may not be doing what we're doing elsewhere. And so that is the danger in doing that. It's not a total comparison of everything else. Now, I understand the theory behind capping interest. I understand the theory about capping interest, making sure that companies don't get a premium. You know, they would want to finance all their activities from loans if they find that interest the interest costs are deductible, then you're encouraging them to finance more of their activities from loan. That is why some PSAs have a debt to equity ratio enshrined in it. I understand the theory of it. And in this case, in what we've examined here, this is not being observed. The money is not coming. You've had engagements with Exxon. I think you've asked them that question. If it's coming from that sector. Did you get an answer? I don't want to answer for Exxon. That is what I'm trying to avoid, that they must answer some questions, like the audit things. I'm not answering. Now they got to answer this. These are our findings. Because when we answer here, then it looks like we're justifying something that they are doing. We are justifying what the new PSA. We can't justify the 2016 PSA in terms of total government take, but we can justify the new PSA, which is stringent, and you've seen Exxon's reaction to it. They don't want to sign that PSA. So that is all I'm saying. Comparison of total. Now also look at attractiveness in getting investment in the country. Suriname has not started producing, well, they were producing oil historically in small quantities at the national Staatsolie. But in terms of a major development, they have not started as yet. And the question is, would they start? So I don't know as yet. So we can use all kinds of regime around the world, but the fact is that we are getting the large investment dollars here that are having an impact on the rest of the economy, on disposable income here, through more spending through our local content law, a lot of people fixing up buildings, etc. Large sums of money that not easily raised in the global environment that we are currently operating in. It's flowing to Ghana. That's a fact. And some countries may have the good regimes on paper, but still have not had the investments. So what I would urge you to do in the future, this is what you should ask a specialist to do. Not Tom Sanzillo. Ask somebody to take our entire new PSA and compare it with Suriname and many other countries in entirety. And you will see how competitive we are, but also how strong the government take is. That is how I approach it. That's why I'm trying to avoid going after interest deductibility. We understand the theory a long time, but it's the totality of the picture that people have to look at.
May I follow up?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So with the understanding of the impact of capping interest rates, etc., what mechanism will the government put in place to safeguard any type of abuse?
Yeah, well, but that's the same sort of thing. I don't think anybody can raise financing to put in a sector like the oil and gas sector now without bringing in substantial equity. The financiers are not going to give them 100%. That is the fear, is that they will ramp up the debt part of financing. That means the financiers will bear the risk of their operations if that were to happen. So implicitly now, because of net zero and all of that, there is almost an automatic arrangement. Of course, we have to look at it carefully too within our own sector agency.
The Troy Resources question?
Oh, the Troy Resources, yes. I've already said that part of it is we're in 2021, but remember they stopped production in about mid-2021, right? That's right. We were in the middle of COVID. People don't understand. A government, the PPP government came in after 5 months of this attempt to steal the elections. We came into office. We were faced at that time, the country was locked down. You had a law locking down. People couldn't come on the road. Tens of thousands of people had lost their jobs because their places were not working, they were home. We had to pass a budget. At that time, because I had responsibility in 4 weeks to produce a budget for the country because there was no budget in 2020. In 4 weeks, I was told by the staff at Ministry of Finance when they came to see me, 6 months it takes for budget preparation. You start from mid-year and then you present it. That's when the circular goes out, 6 months. I said, we're doing it in 4 weeks. In 4 weeks, we prepare a budget. We table it in the parliament and then had to pass that budget. In 4 weeks, just put yourself back, go back a little bit in time. A new government, country lockdown, people not working, the COVID. When we convened, President Ali convened the people from the health sector, the convention center. I was with him. The chief medical officer, we couldn't get from him how many tests per day we could do. Then eventually we're hearing 40 tests per day. That was the first meeting, 40 tests per day. The COVID hospital, not completed, no beds in it, no oxygen, nothing practically. The building's not even finished. Nothing. No, not enough masks in the country. The PPEs, a few hundred of those in the country. In weeks, we had to tackle that. The hospital, we had to get the testing capability up. We had to buy the PPEs. We had to get the budget passed. In 4 weeks, we presented it, we passed it. We then had to get people, we had to start opening up back the country so more people will get back jobs. And all of this constrained from going out too. But this lasted after mid-2021. So I'm accepting that we probably dropped the ball too. But just think about that period. From August of 2020 to August of 2021, when they stopped producing. That was the era that we're in. The last thing you're thinking about at that time might be Troy resources. You're just thinking about keeping people safe and back to work, getting money to them, like the 25,000 grant. We had to go to every home. We're worried about that sort of thing, getting help to people. So I accept that we may have been, but for an editorial to come and say, oh, somehow link it. What is it called again? What? Huh? The Great Escape. The Great Escape. And then blame the PPP. Nigel Dharmlal, Vikram Bharat, Robert Prasad, Donald Ramatar, Ashni Singh. And these people signed an agreement, that's standard agreement in 2014, that any government would have done to bring more jobs here. And the bulk of the money took place was not paid in 2018. You heard what I just said. Where was Jordan at that time? Where was GHK Lal? Why didn't he raise the big stink? And the guy is shameless. I gather he goes to church. This guy is shameless until blame us for the royalty. Look here. PPC government fully to be blamed, fully to blame over unpaid royalties. Shameless, fully to blame us. But that's the integrity he has, or lack of integrity. I had Gulsaran trying to prove integrity now. He has integrity. I didn't see him come back to Gulsaran to speak about the violation of the Audit Act and the Procurement Act. I didn't see him come back, write another letter about that and give explanations for those two issues too that we raised. So that was my position. You understand that? Remember the context. People have to understand that. At that time, so yes, we did.
And just two other quick questions. Outside of taking a diplomatic approach, has the government approached the USA and any of its other allies for additional support? Venezuela's
Our
tactics.
position on Venezuela is in the public domain. We are happy that we could put our politics aside and focus on our country and its sovereignty. The meeting went extremely well. A lot of questions were raised and answers given fully as to our approach. And you've seen the statements from the opposition. Everything that we want to speak about is captured in the statements coming out from the government of Guyana, endorsed by the opposition. I don't want to speak any further on this matter. I don't think a press conference is a forum for sharing my own views on the matter. We have a national position, and not that my views differ from the national position, strongly supports our national position.
Okay. And with regard to the disciplinary...
But I want to say a couple of things about these crooks who, like Rickford Burke and the others. For them, he and Benchcop, they keep persisting and politicizing this issue all the time. Like I saw Benchcop put where Ramattar and Maduro signed an agreement. He said, post the picture. Someone sent it to me, and he said that Ramattar, on my instruction, signed an agreement with Maduro to share our exclusive economic zone. If you check the foreign ministry, it's the communique that was signed, which was a communique that's probably in the public domain. Nothing to do with borders. Absolutely nothing to do with border when Maduro came here. And then Rickford Burke keeps persisting on this matter. This criminal Rickford Burke, I think this is not good for his fundraising activities overseas. I heard he made a down payment on a new vehicle recently with money raised from the Washington conference. Might be moving into a better apartment too, out of the basement. So I want to condemn their attempt to politicize this matter and to distort anything to do with our border. They're free to talk nonsense in the other areas, and we'd be tolerant to them, and we'll give them a cussing on these issues, on the other issues, but not on the border.
Thank you. And finally for me, are you aware of the extent of the disciplinary action that has been leveled or handed out for Mr. Bobby Gosai? And do you think it's sufficient?
I said to Vikram Bharrat to deal with that matter. He has dealt with it, and he sent out a document to that effect. You didn't see it? Yes. Did you receive a copy of the statement? Yes, because I think she approached directly, and they received a copy of the statement. There's a statement out on that. Okay. No,
Be sure to
you see the statement. You didn't see the statement, see the statement, please. Right? The statement captures our position, or the ministry's position.
Good afternoon, Kemal King, Oil Now. Mr. Jagdeo, on the question of the audit, could you provide revised timelines for the negotiation period and the award of contracts?
Okay. For the award of
awards of the contract. The schedule that you had
For
initially
the audits or for
no, the auction. The auction.
auction? You said
Right.
audit, yeah. So I was wondering with that. So we'd start this in earnest now, but I don't want to put pressure on our people too, because an artificial timeline. They need to do proper due diligence. They may need to make sure that the government's interests are taken care of. And so our lawyers and others would be addressing this. But now the awards are out, so people know. So or they would probably invite them in for negotiations beginning next week.
Okay, so if negotiations fall through with the Exxon-led group or any other, would you then move to the next most substantially responsive bidder?
If there is a second bidder there, yes, I think we can then move to the other bidder.
Okay. There are in about 3 months, Guyana is going to join the UN Security Council. And given what you've just said about what's going on with Israel and Palestine, does government have any specific action it will take there, or with the new composition?
You've heard what I said about our role in the Security Council and our presence in the Security Council. The last thing I will do is at a press conference speculate about what we will say and what we will not say. Now we have a plan, and our global position on questions of the development of the global South, peace and security across the world, the fight against international terrorism, they're all publicly known and well-established positions, and they will guide our mission in the UN Security Council. In terms of our position on specific issues, the UN Security Council is a place where a lot of discussions take place among the parties, the permanent members and the elected members. And it would be premature for me to say, we will do this on a specific issue or we'll not do this on a specific issue before that issue has been presented to our mission to the Security Council.
Have you been able to, at this stage, ascertain the quality of the work by the local auditors in the oil audit of Exxon's 2018 to 2020 costs? You had said that you need to get a report on that quality to decide on whether to include local auditing firms in future audits.
So this is what the GRA will provide as part of their advice to us. No, I've not done it as yet, but I see the media is very pleased with it now. So maybe that's a reflection of the quality of the audit.
Okay, given that the ExxonMobil has now submitted its documents for the Whiptail project, could you say who is the consultant that's assisting with the review of the field development plan and the EIA, and what's the timeline for that?
So I think the consultants who have familiarity with it, the ministry will go with the same consultants. Bayface, I think it's Bayface is the consultant. And then there is another group out of Canada that has assisted Bayface. So they've done the review for most of the other projects, starting from, I think, Payar, when we got into office.
Okay,
I'm not dealing with timelines as yet. They would take as much time as is necessary to complete the review professionally without having to cut corners. So whenever they're completed, of course we don't want them to take 300 years, but where they would have adequate time, and then they can come to the government.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask finally about...
But I told you on these routine questions too. Please submit them. I spoke with the minister already. If you submit these questions, in the course of the week to the ministry, you can get stories, them responding. I've asked them to respond to a number of things in the media and through statements, press statements on these issues. So you can have documented our position. So every time now Kaichur News raises one issue, I'll point them to the release. I'll just go back because it's becoming a bit repetitive for every week, me saying the same thing over and over. And so I'll just get a copy of the releases, all the releases on ring fencing, interest, etc., and then I'll hand it back to you when you raise it at the press conference. So then I don't have to repeat. So that's why we're going down this route.
I mean, every time this happens, I mean, you
so
can...
you just heard Bayface, you asked me a question, I gave you an answer. I told you the consultants. You asked a timeline, I said, we will, I can't give you a timeline, but I will not, before it comes to the cabinet, pressure them because ExxonMobil wants it in a particular time that we will say to our consultants, you have to get it done in keeping with the Exxon timeline. I don't know if Exxon told you a timeline. Did they give you a timeline? But that's not germane in our assessment of it.
Okay. Finally, I just wanted to find out on the quarantine block front, what's going on there in terms of CGX's plans to drill more wells, to move forward with the development?
Well, from what I gather, again, you'd have to confirm this. They have 2 years now consistent with the exploration license, because to complete the appraisal and decide whether they will move to a development, they have 2 years. Nothing more on that.
Good afternoon, Trina Williams from Guyana Chronicle. Dr. Jagdeo, as the year draws closer to the end, please reflect on how the government has been able to cushion the effects of global economic conditions.
Yeah, what would happen is that the end of year press conferences are going to be big. So all the ministers would have to do their press conferences at the end of the year. I don't want to spend, if I go to do that now, it'll take me about 4 or 5 hours because I want to talk about every sector here, about what we have done and all of that. I just don't want to kill all of this and give the ministers a chance in each sector to speak about the plans that we set ourselves at the beginning of the year, the challenges we face, how we have accomplished them. Like procurement is a big issue I want to address because lots of concerns about procurement, some valid and some pushed by a lot of people who feel aggrieved if they're not getting work, although they bid and their prices are very high and they don't get the job, then they go and write a letter to the newspapers. I saw someone, Mr. Sean Smith, who is an APNU councillor in Region 6, who said he wrote a letter to the newspaper saying that someone used his email, he gave the name of the person to complain about the process in Berbice, and he said that's not true, that we're pleased with the 267 roads that are going to be built in Berbice now, and a lot of people got their work. A few did not get, and we're looking into that. A lot of people WhatsApp me, they sent me messages, they contacted my office. I'm reviewing all of that because that's a promise we made to review people. They're trying, the MPTAB is trying not to give too much work to a single individual for fear that they don't complete the work. So there is some of that. So a lot of issues are being dealt with. But on the big scale of things, we have about 7,000 contracts on the implementation. And I need to put a perspective on this about this tendering system and this complaint by aggrieved people. I don't have a problem where legitimate people complain. This should happen. There is a process through which they can do this. They can ask for an appeal. They appeal at the tender board. They can go through the the Public Procurement Commission. They can write a letter to the newspaper. But you have a lot of crooks, from what I see, who don't believe that they have a God-given right without, if they tender for a work and it's 20% above the engineer's estimate or any other bid, that they have to get a work. This is a competitive system. If you have 20 people bidding on a job, then the likelihood is that 19 will not get it. But you have 2 from the 19 who believe they should have gotten it at any cost. Because some of them would say to me, oh, I once lifted a spoon for the PPP. You know, that's what they claim, some of them. And also, I need to make this clear. We are all to expose, in favor of exposing shoddy work. I've urged citizens to do that, where we will defend the right of people to expose fraud in procurement and tendering, but don't get some of the people who are anonymous complainers. They just are aggrieved people, or and a good dose are APNU, like the Mahi Pauls and the others in the world. So, yes, is there any? I'm sorry, I don't want to go through that. The question you asked about the end of the year review, that will come. I think in December we will get a lot of that by the ministers themselves, and maybe I'll set a 7 hours press conference for one of those, right?
Yes, good afternoon, sir. And Anassa Williams, Kaiser News. The audit revealed that Exxon deducted US $58.5 million in COVID expenses for 2020 alone. 2021 and 2022 aren't out as yet, but this is evidence that the company was working during the pandemic. Are you still maintaining that Exxon should be given another year before they relinquish 20% of the Sabre block?
So they were taking measures. So it showed, in fact, you're saying that you're supporting Granger's extension because Granger gave the extension. We just said you have to supply to us information as to the planned activities and how they were not carried out, where they departed from the planned activities. They have supplied evidence to that effect, saying these are the number of wells in our plans to drill. Here, we didn't get to do all of these. But the extension was given long before we got into office. In fact, a couple days before we got into the office, when Granger had already lost the elections. He did it in July of 2020. And so the fact is that they were spending money to keep the operations going in the period of the audit, to put people up at the hotels and quarantine them, their staff, and then flying them back out to the FPSO. There's a measure that they took. Now, our auditors had issue with their cost and what's provided for. So that has to be the magnitude of their claims and the veracity of their claims would have to be demonstrated. That's a different story. But what you're saying supports the extension. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Rihanna, Kaiser News. Last week you acknowledged that if the oil company uses profits from one oil block to develop another block,
it would be illegal.
Yes.
And I maintain that position. I repeated it here. They would have to, and the audits now said that they did, and therefore there will be consequences to that. So last week I said that.
Pound on the consequences if
Yeah, well, the same thing. If you unauthorized, you did unauthorized. You don't go to jail according to the PSA. It just doesn't form part of the cost back.
Okay.
Okay? So it's clear. I mentioned it earlier back in the press conference. Very same thing I said last year. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Guyanese critic for Daybreak News. The president and the opposition leader have unified on the Venezuelan situation. The opposition leader representing the opposition, is it holistically? Because there seems to be, although there's a unification between the PPP and the PNC, there seems to be problems with the PNC and the AFC. Is Norton representing the AFC, or they're out in the wind with this one?
Well, when we attended the meeting, Mr. Ramjatan was at the meeting too, with Mr. Norton. So they were both there, and the sentiments expressed by both of them when they exited the office reflected the national unified position. So I would assume that that both parties share that view, the AFC and the PNC. At the meeting itself, it was a positive meeting, and we dealt with the whole issue about the migrants here. And remember, that was the subject of a dedicated press conference by APNU. We pointed out about the several things. I repeated much of what I said before about the concerns that they're expressing now were concerns that I expressed in the period when we were in opposition, when APNU had decided to build settlements in Region 1 to settle the migrants. I had expressed the same sentiments that they're today expressing. And that's in the public domain for everyone to see. I pointed out that we are, what I said at the last meeting, that the numbers are not overwhelming in terms of people being registered for electoral purposes. I gave the details of the registration process. They falsely claimed that that was so without providing evidence when asked to do so by Chabral. I pointed out that the number of registrants across the region did not reflect any change from historic registration periods, nor from reflecting the demography of our country in terms of concentration of where people live, the numbers in the regions. So we dealt with that here at the press conference, repeated it there. In terms of, I said that there are categories of people here, and the President reiterated this, that the Guyanese are eligible, and their children and their people who are related to us by blood, that is Guyanese, have Guyanese blood in them, they have a special protection under our Constitution and our law. If they have like a few drops of our blood, they're eligible for certain rights that nobody can deny them, regardless if they're born abroad or not. And not the PPP, not PNC, nobody can deny them those rights. And we don't intend to deny any Guyanese who fled this country and come back with their children. They're now looking for a better economic future here. We don't intend to deny them any rights here. And we pointed out again that the Waraos, these are people historically who've moved across the border. 1 week, 150 come across the border, now on our side, and the next week they're on the other side. So migrant population, but the Waraos have a right to settle in any part of Guyana. And a lot of them are moved and settling in other parts. We pointed out the difference between those two categories of people and others. We pointed out they asked for numbers and all of that stuff, and we pointed out again that whilst there is a best estimate, that it's even harder than with the Haitians. When the Haitians were here, you'd recall that Winston Felix said, he gave us, when questioned in the parliament, he gave us a number of people who came into the country, but he didn't, 40,000 persons he couldn't account for. And they were not in Guyana. The Haitians, we said, they were not here. They were being trafficked through the country. They were not coming here to stay by gangs. He did fail to provide. He said he doesn't know where they are. Immigration numbers didn't capture 40,000 people leaving Guyana. And now, and they were coming through recognized ports of entry, which is either Skeldon or Temeri, and leaving through a crossing there, recognized port of entry. In the Venezuelan case, they come through many places, not recognized ports of entry. So you want farm numbers here, and you couldn't even provide it to people who are coming through the recognized ports of entry. That is why you have to work with best estimates, and there are best estimates. So a lot of where they see a jumbie in every bush, it's nothing of that sort. APNU sees a jumbie in every bush. And therefore, you know, there is the paranoia and the excuse making about, oh, Venezuelans now are going, like the Russians, they will cause us to lose the elections. You're not going to lose the elections because of Venezuelans registering and voting. You lose it because you have no plan for the country and you had a disastrous 5 years in government. That's why you'd lose.
Some clarity for my
right, yeah.
Some clarity for my next question. Were you at the meeting with the opposition leader and the president?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
You don't look at you don't follow the news. I think your own news outfit had me in a picture there. You don't follow your own news outfit.
So the question is, given your background and your experience, do you consider the opposition being genuine, looking at the fact that what they did, as you said, with the Russians, what they did in 2020 with the election, they've always been hem and haw. Are they serious about us unifying against Venezuela?
Yes, they are. They are serious. And I would not question their sincerity on that matter. For us, I know how we felt, even in opposition. When in the 5 months period, we were at loggerheads and they were attempting to steal the elections. Even at that time, I said to Gail Teixeira, they invited us when because we are moving forward on our ICJ cases, and we attended and we participated. I directed that we do that, even in that period when they were trying to steal the elections, because this is bigger than all of us. You know, we can have our internal politics and fight over this all the time and stuff, but where it concerns our country, our sovereignty, our people as a whole, that is something that's out of politics. And I think they're sincere about it.
Culture News, just to bring you to a question on the audits. What is your reaction to the fact that ExxonMobil could be shortening our profits by spending money on personal expenses and so forth?
Did I just answer that question before, man? I know you have a hard time now because Glenn Lal is watching. He's watching there now, right? Thank you for the question, so I don't put you in trouble. It's a tough question for me to answer. So Glenn Lal would hear that you're putting me on the spot, right? It's a tough question for me to answer, but please refer to what I said earlier.
Okay.
All right?
Well,
so you did your bit here, and you asked me a tough question here.
Very tough question, okay.
Yeah.
Last week you explained that without ring fencing, Guyana could still rake in large sums of revenue over time. But what if oil prices drop? Isn't it better to ring fence now than wait?
Yeah, they're always. If you're Oil prices can drop anytime, but if you base an industry on your oil prices drop, we might as well not make further investments. Nobody would want to make further investment. Why do you think that they're going to put in nearly $60 billion, 12 times or maybe 11 times the total savings in our country, in our banking system? Why do you think somebody would invest that if they don't think that they would make money? They're not stupid people. They don't want to lose $60 billion. You just heard about the demand, the global demand. There is now an assessment that oil prices could go to $200 a barrel because of shortages. Remember, Saudi Arabia and all the others, they're very tight, the global reserves and investments globally. So you have to look at what the specialists are saying, not Tom Sanzillo. Sanzillo is a useless person. I don't think he is a specialist on anything. You're a political scientist, not a specialist. Look at what the IEA is saying. This is that's what they do every day for a living. See what they're saying about oil and crude demand for the future. That is how you make investment decisions. If that's the, if we go with that philosophy, we'd eat up every cent today and say, what will happen tomorrow? Tomorrow might be bleaker, so why not eat everything out in the house today and forget about tomorrow? That is the philosophy. We can't work as a country like that. And Glenn want to eat up everything now, right?
One final question before I hand to my colleague.
All right, okay.
With more and more foreign companies talking about mega gold finds and so forth, what benefits does this have for the Guyanese people, or large, given that we have?
So one of the, well, first of all, it's the royalty and the jobs. Well, we made it clear historically. And when the last thing I did before I left the presidency, the royalty rate for OMI and the others were 5%. And then in the new agreements for large scale, it moves up to 8% if the price of gold is above $1,000. And it has been consistently above $1,000 since then. So we moved the royalty rate from 5% to 8%. A lot of them said it would be unattractive, but we pursued it. They had to sign on to that. So now we get the 8% royalty. The locals have a lower royalty rate. You remember APNUA, they increased it, and we reduced it back since we got into office. We have seen the production numbers. So the president convened a meeting with the agencies and including some of the people. And we made it clear. Let me say this now. I'm glad that you raised this. We are looking at the numbers clearly. We believe there is significant under-declaration of the production. At this stage, when we look at the combined purchases, it's more in Guyana, which are below last year level. It's nearly 30,000 ounces above the production number. So we believe that some producers are not declaring because they're making bigger investments in the area, but they're not declaring. The second point is that they're selling to people who are not authorized to buy gold. So there's 6 authorized dealers, and there's the gold board. Now, if you sell your gold to anyone else, it means you're committing an illegal act. And we made it clear that anybody, because there's a lot of information now, the intelligence, we have a dedicated intelligence operation to find out who these people are. If you sell gold to an unauthorized dealer, you run the risk, if you have a claim, of losing, not just getting prosecuted, but losing your claim. Losing your claim. Because you're committing an illegal act. The people who are buying gold who don't have licenses, we believe they're buying for maybe all sorts of people, because the premium they're paying can be justified by the world market prices. So they too will face prosecution. So both parties, the buyers and the sellers, would face prosecution, and the sellers, if they are producers, they run the risk of losing their claim. That came out clearly from the president's meeting. The ministry put out a release. I don't see it getting enough traction, but let me reiterate it here. Reiterate, that is how we're approaching the matter seriously in this regard. So thank you for bringing it. No, we don't have no evidence of that. You had said that some company stealing the gold. I told you the manganese people. So I asked you to give the details that you had to the ministry so we can find out whether the manganese people are recovering gold from the manganese plant, right? So we need to get that detail. But we don't have any evidence that it's foreign company, but whether it's foreign or local, the same would apply. The same sanctions would apply.
I don't know if I missed it, but I need clarity back on the auction. Now that the awards have been announced, if government has given the companies a time frame in which they should respond.
So
go ahead.
What I said is that now that the awards, or cabinet has approved these awards, they will now be invited in. So that will determine the pace at which they can move the negotiations and the conclusions. Remember, they would have to come verify their plan, show sources of financing, show the ability to pay their signature bonus, all of that. So they will be engaged next week. And by the way, on Monday, where it is our aim to put out the gas strategy for public consultation on Monday next. So I forgot about that. So I just want to tell you that Monday next, we'll put out the gas strategy.
So each company would have a different time in which they respond to their respective bid?
So assuming not that they would have to all come in now, right? Mm-hmm. But assuming a company is a big company and say, we can go next week, we agree to your draft agreement, we ready, we deposit your money next week. The other company says, oh, the development plan, we have to firm up some issues here, then they would have more time. We want to do a good job. Time is not the issue here. It is about doing a good job, making sure the due diligence is done, the proper contracts are signed. We're not rushing, we're not running a sprint here. So if it takes 1 month in some cases and 3 months in the other cases for other people, that's fine with us, provided there is a good job done.
But what I really want to know is, have we given it a maximum? If one company wants a year, if I say I want 2 years.
No, it's not. They are not going to come and say, I want 2 years. When in the discussions, we will know whether people are serious. So assuming some company said, we need 2 years to sign this agreement, then clearly we can't go with that. We can't go with that. So let's have the discussion first with the companies, and then we'll get back to you. I don't want to...
A decision on a maximum time?
Maximum time. I would assume that they all want to do this swiftly. We will include our consultants. The consultants would be included in the finalization. We'd have to get lawyers, good quality lawyers and everything to do that. It would not be a Trotman affair. All right.